That's right, Mom. She makes me not want to go to school. I'm scared.
You lie. You hate Lucas. And you want to find a way to hurt Lucas.
Don't slander me, Mrs. Susan. Mrs. Susan. Don't say nonsense. I am Lucas's teacher now. I have the right to punish Lucas when he doesn't study well.
Mrs. Pear. That is anti-educational behavior.
That is strictness, Mrs. Susan. Lucas is not good at literature. He needs to study harder. Don't you always want him to be good at literature?
But your method is too harsh. Lucas is afraid of going to school.
I don't care. The duty of a teacher like me is to help students improve.
Mrs. Pear. I warn you. If you do anything to Lucas again, I won't forgive you.
Does she think she can do anything to me? I am Lucas's class teacher. I have full authority to arrange.
Mrs. Susan. I am sorry. Mrs. Pear is Miss Mary's substitute teacher. She has full authority to decide Lucas's class.
Miss Laurie. But she's too strict. Lucas is afraid of going to school.
I'm sorry. I can't interfere with each class's affairs. As long as the teacher's methods are correct. And I don't see anything wrong with Mrs. Pear.
Miss Laurie. But she's trying to hurt Lucas. Wait. Miss Laurie. I have an idea.
As long as it helps education. I agree.
Okay, Miss Laurie.
Lucas's mother protects him from Mrs. Pear.
Mrs. Susan.
Mom!
Why are you here?
I'm free. And I've got Miss Laurie's approval. I'm going to be the class monitor, Mrs. Pear. I'll sit here and supervise your teaching.
What? Why is that?
Mom! That's great! Mrs. Pear won't be able to punish you unreasonably.
That's right, Lucas.
Mrs. Susan. You want to confront me?
Yes, I do. Miss Laurie let me be Lucas's class monitor. If you haven't done anything wrong, why are you so scared? Or are you doing something wrong? So you're scared. right?
Mrs. Susan, I don't think you and I have that much grudge. The last time, you always sabotaged me. And this time, too.
I'm just protecting my son, Mrs. Pear.
Mom, stop arguing. Please teach.
Hey, Apple. It's not my fault. It's hers.
Mrs. Pear. Just teach. Don't blame others.
Lucas, here's a question for you. There's a woman and 3 children. The woman is in a wheelchair. How many legs are there in total in this situation?
It's easy, Mrs. Pear. Everyone has 2 legs. 4 people are 8 legs. The answer is 8.
Lucas, you answered wrong. In this situation, there are only 6 legs.
Why?
Because the woman is in a wheelchair. She has 2 disabled legs. How can she use them? Lucas, you answered wrong. Go out to the schoolyard and run 10 laps for me.
But,
Mrs. Pear. I object.
Mrs. Susan, you can't object. I'm a teacher. I have the right.
You can't, Mrs. Pear. I'm a supervisor. I feel you're punishing Lucas too harshly. I don't agree. Besides, this is a tricky problem. Lucas hasn't learned these kinds of maths. How could he answer?
But Lucas answered wrong. This punishment helps him remember. After that, he won't dare to make mistakes again.
You're wrong, Mrs. Pear. Education is a student's experience. Even if the student makes a mistake, you can't punish them too severely.
Hey, Mrs. Susan. Don't think you're the supervisor and object to me. I'm the teacher of this class. I have the right.
You don't have the right, Mrs. Pear. You can't punish my son.
Mom!
Mom! Please stop arguing.
Hey, why are you so noisy?
This is between us. Please leave.
Okay, I understand. They're so fierce. I'm scared.
Lucas! They keep arguing like that. How can we study?
I don't think it's because of me. But Mom is here. I know Mom is worried about me. But if Mom and Mrs. Pear argue like this, how can we continue studying? Wait! I have a way!
Lucas, where are you going?
Mrs. Pear. Don't be a teacher. You're not fit.
Neither are you, Mrs. Susan. You're too protective of your son.
Please stop!
Raymond?
He's from the National Student Protection Organization.
Why are you here?
I know everything. Sister Pear. Even though you're my cousin, I have to give you a fine.
What?
Mrs. Susan is right to defend Lucas. You're too harsh on Lucas. Sister Pear. Here's a $2,000 fine. Please leave here and pay the fine.
What did you say?
I will take your place in teaching this class. Until Miss Mary comes back.
Then Mr. Raymond taught my class. A few days later, Teacher Mary came back. And Mrs. Pear.
Mom, what's wrong with you?
Raymond has never been angry with me. He has always been a good cousin. But because of Lucas, he changed.
Why in the trick question, there are 4 people but only 6 legs? A. Because the woman in the problem is in a wheelchair. D. Because Mrs. Pear gave the wrong answer. C. Because the problem is wrong. D. None of the answers are correct. Please subscribe channel if you like my content. That's the motivation for me to create new videos. Thank you very much.